All right. In terms of authorship, just some thoughts here. So the first question is who counts as an author? There's different guidelines. This one is from the +1 journal. So a person is an author if they've made substantial contributions to the conception, the design, acquisition of data, analysis, interpretation of data, and they were involved in drafting the article or revising it, and they were involved in final approval, and they agree to be accountable for all aspects of the work. Right, so if you work with a collaborator, like let's say you have NREL as a project partner, and they've helped you, but ultimately they don't want to be, or they aren't in a position to like sign on to the work you've done so that they're also like on the hook if something goes wrong, to say it in the worst possible way, then you would not include them as an author. You'd include them in the acknowledgements. Right? Authors are people who are somehow staking their name on what's in this paper. In terms of author order, the way it would go is you individually, the student leading the work, would be the primary author, the first author. And then anybody, if it's like you have, like in the case of the operator training project, you have maybe people who are contributing in different areas, but like say, Matt puts in a paper on the solar field modeling, but Anna helped with, one of the valve models or something like that, right? Anna would be a co-author on that because she helped and was part of the development process, but Matt would lead it. So that's that kind of thing. The last author is in academia, the last author is your advisor, so usually me. Acknowledgements would be anybody who's contributed to the project that it doesn't meet the criteria for authorship, or funding agency who isn't directly involved in the research but provided funding. Acknowledgements typically are not things like, thanks to my cat for always being there, stuff like that. You kind of want to keep it as like people that are related directly to the work that's going on. There are some guidelines for like what contributions are. Let's get this out of the way. So this table kind of shows how you'd break down the different possible ways that an individual could contribute to a paper. So it might be worth just looking at this. Like a lot of what you guys are doing is, conceptualization, analysis, data, investigation. What you're probably not doing a lot of is project administration, supervision, but those are, I would argue, for my own selfish reasons, those are equally important to the research and part of the co-authorship process. So you can just look at this and see the different ways that people are given credit for being authors on papers. I know we're kind of at time here. I think I just have I'll go quickly through this. Maybe give me 5 more minutes if that's okay. So the review process, just what you should expect is, let's say you get all the way to the point where I'm happy, your other advisors are happy, your co-authors are happy, we submit to the journal. What the timeline looks like from there is, it's not necessarily a fast process. It can take like up to a week for the editor to just check it, make sure there's no issues, make sure there's you haven't like violated a formatting issue, or there's not, plagiarism checker that caught something that needs to be looked at. If that gets past that point, gets past the editor, they send it out for peer review. The peer review process can be anywhere from a week, 2 weeks to a couple months. If it goes beyond, say, 3 or 4 months, then that's maybe getting to be the exception. Normally, the review process, they target like 4 weeks to 6 weeks for that. The peer reviewers are going to be experts in the field, who could be folks like myself. It could be even other students who have published in that field before. But it's experts who have something to say about it. Then it comes once all the reviews come back, then the editor will decide whether or not they should accept it outright. It's very rare. Whether it should be accepted with revisions is pretty common. Whether it should be accepted with major revisions, which is also pretty common. Whether it should be rejected outright, which is, depending on the journal, pretty common. So there's those outcomes. They would make that decision, and then they would come back to the authors and say, here's the decision. They will give you something ridiculous like a week or something to make the edits if needed. Sometimes you can ask for more time, but it all feels a little unfair, right? You give the reviewers, 2 months to do something, and then you get a few days. But that's usually how it works. So you come back, then you have to make changes, and then you go back and resubmit. So you resubmit, they have another chance to review. If it's accepted, then it would be like, about a few weeks for that. Then you have to go through the whole proofing process, and that can take some time to iterate back and forth. Like they go and typeset your article. They say, did I make any mistakes? You say yes, about 15. They go back and fix those, and it's kind of this back and forth. So from start to finish, I would say, you're looking at anywhere from at the fastest a few months to at the longest. I've had papers that have taken a year and a half to get published. So it doesn't necessarily stop you from doing what you need to do. It's just this goes on in the background while you are graduated or whatever, right? The goal for you guys is get a paper submitted like a couple months before you graduate so that you at least have time to help with the edits if needed. And then beyond that, a lot of the stuff can be your advisor. Review process. Again, common issues. If you have, if you sort of recycle content from a prior paper, that's your own paper, journals can catch that in their automatic plagiarism checkers, and they'll just like outright deny it or reject it. So you want to be careful about reusing stuff, even if it's your own material. If you do reuse your own material, just change it around a little, just so it gets through the plagiarism checker. But it's not considered plagiarism if it's from your thesis, but if it's from a journal publication, they can get in trouble for copyright if it's like verbatim. Reviewers are slow. Editor decision and the suitability for the journal, like you might just submit it, and then the editor would say, yeah, this isn't right for our journal. Send it somewhere else. So that happens. What to expect? Oh, yeah, Matthew's asking about what about self-referencing a technical report? So I think if it's published and indexed, it would be like self-plagiarism. The one exception is thesis material. So journals are okay with you recycling thesis material because it's expected that thesis stuff is to be recycled. So how we would respond, what to expect from reviewers. It turns out reviewer 1 almost always loves the paper. Reviewer 3 almost always hates the paper. And then reviewer 2 is somewhere in the middle. And they purposely order them so that they'll give you the most favorable review first. So that's usually how it goes. And there's usually a reviewer that has some problem, right? That's fine, right? That's okay. It's usually a mix of fair criticism of things that they just wish you would have done and didn't do. And then just misunderstandings of what you've done. In all cases, we want to address the comments directly. Like, we won't just sweep any comment under the rug and ignore it. We want to at least say, okay, yeah, I did describe that. You just missed it. You want to say that, you'd say, okay, we edited sections, 4.31 for clarity to better address your comment here by, adding this material or whatever. You always want to directly address. These are reviewers who are volunteering their time to look at your paper. You just give them the courtesy of saying, and here's what I did to address your concern. So we would produce a detailed response document that goes with the comments. So you take the comment, you take your response, and then you give your own description or rebuttal if needed to what they're saying. Make the change, and then we would resend that in. Okay, so the last thing I have is just some ideas about places you can publish. Impact factors, a measure of how many times a particular article is on average cited in each venue. So if you publish in like applied energy or energy conversion and management, those are pretty high impact factors. Like something like Nature is going to be in the 50s, but the next journal up is going to be 20s. Like top journals in engineering research are in the teens for impact factor. So this is, again, on average, how many times your article would be cited if it was published in this venue. The higher the impact factor, the more selective usually the journal is, and the harder it is to get published. But the bigger the ego boost when you actually get it published there. So you can look through these. There's just different, these are like 10 of 30 that you could probably publish in, but these are ones I published in and have had some success with. So.